Welcome to Georgetown University's Lorfink Auditorium. Our program is about to begin. Please take a moment and silence your electronic devices. Thank you. And now, welcome to the stage, Joel Hellman, Dean of the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown University, and Gina Raimondo, the 40th United States Secretary of Commerce.
Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to everyone here and to all of those who are watching online. We're so grateful to have Secretary Raimondo here with us today to make an important critical speech on technology and the future of technology in this country and to answer questions from our students here in the audience. Now, I have to take this opportunity to maybe correct a misimpression about the School of Foreign Service. We're normally known as the leading school for diplomacy in the United States, and we've educated more ambassadors and diplomats than any school in the United States. However, we were actually created 100 years ago by a group of businessmen who wanted to create a school of foreign trade. It was just after World War I. The chairman of U.S. Steel, the chairman of the Merchant Marine, and others had built capacity, tremendous capacity to support the war effort, and they were wondering what's going to happen after the war is over when the school was created in 1919, and they thought the future is projecting American engagement around the world through trade and commerce. And they wanted to create a new school for that, and they went to Georgetown University and said, we have an idea for a school of foreign trade. And the Jesuits at Georgetown said, interesting idea, trade doesn't sound like what we normally do here. So literally, I have a document in my office that says the School of Foreign Trade, and its trade is crossed out, and service is written in, because that's a true Jesuit ideal. And for our first years, what we did was train people for the commercial and trade as commercial and trade attaches, and they went around the world pursuing engagement in commerce and trade, not just for the economic betterment of the country and the world, but a recognition that security, fundamentally, after the war, was going to be based on the strength of our economics engagement. So that's our history, and that's why it's so fitting that we have the Secretary of Commerce here today at another really crucial inflection point in the global system to talk about the key role that commerce technology plays in our security, diplomacy, and the projection of a new global order. Now, I hope everyone knows that Secretary Raimondo serves as the 40th U.S. Secretary of Commerce. She's focused on a simple but vital mission to spur good-paying jobs, empower entrepreneurs to innovate and grow, and help American workers and businesses compete. She was formerly the 75th governor of Rhode Island, serving 2 terms, the first woman governor of Rhode Island. I'd like to point out that we have a number of students here who hail from Rhode Island in the audience today, here in our front row. And she also founded her own business and was general treasurer of the state of Rhode Island. And the secretary will give some remarks, and then we'll have a conversation with one of our own graduates, Emily Weinstein. She's a 2019 graduate of the School of Foreign Service of our Security Studies program, and she's now a research fellow at our Center for Security and Emerging Technology, which looks at the interaction of the issues that the Secretary is going to discuss, where she focuses on U.S. national competitiveness in AI and ML technology and U.S.-China technology competition. So please join me in welcoming Secretary Raimondo to Georgetown. Thanks, Dr.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. The dean was telling me earlier that the second most popular major or area of focus here at the School of Foreign Service is Science, Technology, and International Affairs major. So, exactly. So what better place in America than right here at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service to deliver this message? I'm grateful for you to hosting me. I'm also impressed because back when I was in college, Thursday began the weekend. So the fact that you're here on a Thursday, packing the audience on such a deep topic, you should feel great. I feel great about the future of the country knowing that you're that committed. So I'm thrilled to be here. I am thrilled to be here. You probably heard the President in the State of the Union a couple of weeks ago talk about chips and science and semiconductors. And as he would say, it's a big deal. It is a very big deal. And we're at an important moment in history, as your dean just said. And today, I want to talk about the vision. I want to talk about the incredible opportunity that we have now in America as a nation to unleash the next generation of American innovation, protect our national security, and preserve our global economic competitiveness as we implement the CHIPS and Science Act. You know, America is a nation of invention. America is a nation of innovators. Our entrepreneurs and innovators are the envy of the world, from light bulbs to lasers, from semiconductors to supercomputers. We have always been a nation of invention, entrepreneurship, and innovation. That's our edge. We have to keep that edge. And throughout our history, there have been moments, critical moments, inflection points, just like the moment we're in right now, moments of tremendous global competition, where we as a country have come together to drive technological progress on an unprecedented scale, and in so doing, ensure our global leadership. That's where we are right now. And you know some of those moments. In the 1860s, President Lincoln made historic investments in agriculture and created the land-grant university system to ensure America's food security. In the 1940s, Presidents Roosevelt and Truman invested in our nuclear security and pushed the boundaries of scientific innovation in the process. In 1961, President Kennedy united this entire country around his call to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade. And by doing that, issuing that call to America, President Kennedy led to the creation of a generation of engineers, scientists, test pilots, and manufacturing workers who propelled this economy and our national security to be leading in the world and far ahead of the Soviet Union. Well, we have a chance to do that again today. Today, at this moment of intense global competition, because of President Biden's leadership and his work in a bipartisan way with Congress, the CHIPS and Science Act presents us with an opportunity to make investments that are similarly consequential for our country's future. But only if we as a country unite behind a shared objective and generate a similar public-private mobilization and think boldly and think big. This is so much more than incentivizing the creation of a few new semiconductor fabs around the country. So much more. The research, innovation, and manufacturing sparked by this law will enable the United States to be the technological superpower, securing our economic and national security for the next generation. Just like our leadership in nuclear energy and the space race, our ability to maintain our competitive edge in advanced technology is essential to our ability to ensure the responsible deployment of that technology. Semiconductors are unique. They're unique in their ubiquity. Semiconductors form the foundation of every single advanced technology. Everything is on the foundation. AI, quantum, cloud, big data, the foundation of chips. And every one of those technologies can be used for good or, in the wrong hands, can be used for malign purposes like we've never seen. Folks, the stakes couldn't be higher, could not be higher, which is why we have to win. So next week, on next Tuesday, I'll be launching the first application for CHIPS funding. We'll be starting to put the money out to companies that want to apply, and it'll be focused on manufacturing facilities. The money is intended to incentivize companies to manufacture semiconductors in America. And in the coming months, we'll be putting out other applications for funding opportunities in the supply chain for semiconductors, as well as research and development. Years from now, when I'm retired and you guys are running the world, you'll judge the success of this program on a couple of key imperatives. First, you're going to say, did we implement CHIPS and Science in a way that built a reliable, resilient semiconductor industry that protects America's technological leadership? You will know, did we achieve the grand vision that I'm going to lay out today? Because here's the reality. As global competition becomes increasingly about technology and chips, it's not just about missiles and tanks and drones. Our global competition and our leadership and ability to compete and lead the world depends on our ability to invest in research and development and innovation and the workforce that will lead in the 21st century. It isn't just military equipment. And you will say, did this moment spark that next wave of innovation? And second, you will ask, were we good stewards of taxpayer money? And I take that very seriously, particularly as a former governor. We are making a public investment, taxpayer money of the American people, public investment in private industry of a size and scale without recent precedent. And the people of America deserve transparency and accountability. And I expect to be held accountable. Now, I'm here to tell you where we're going with this, but bear with me for a minute. You have comfortable seats, get cozy. Bear with me for a minute, and let's take a look back. The United States of America invented the semiconductor industry. And actually, in the 1960s, some of you here may remember, maybe not the students, the industry was in a golden age. New companies were sprouting up left and right in what came to be known as Silicon Valley for the silicon and chips. Universities established new departments in computer science, electrical engineering, material science to train the talent and workers the industry needed. And here's something really interesting. It was manufacturing, not creation of algorithms, not software, not the internet. It was manufacturing of hardware, making things that powered that engine of innovation. And chips companies were fiercely competitive, of course. Competition makes us great. But there was also an industry-wide effort to advance the technology for the betterment of the whole industry. And by the way, the government drove advances through purchases, DoD purchases and tech transfer. Every day, tens of thousands of engineers in those companies would make incremental innovations in manufacturing techniques, which resulted in improved scaling and yield. Those kinds of incremental but necessary improvements in manufacturing are only possible when you produce millions and millions of wafers. And there was a relentless pace of innovation from the lab to the fab and the fab to the lab. And that pace of innovation, lab to fab, fab to lab, became synonymous with America's tech leadership, which allowed us to double our compute capacity every 2 years. It's why you have the internet in your pocket. It's why folks have a smartphone. It's why we have cloud computing services. It's why we lead in EVs and sophisticated medical devices and have the most advanced military in the world. It was that, and it started because we made them in America. And so what was once a self-propelling engine of innovation and production, it just fell out of balance. In the search of cheap labor in Asia, taking our eye off the ball of the innovation that comes from manufacturing, we sacrificed our manufacturing capacity and our workforce in the mistaken belief that we could somehow maintain our technological leadership without them. But it isn't possible. We've learned that. We're learning that now. It's actually quite painful if you just look at the facts. In 1990, when I was in college and in your shoes, the United States, which is to say not long ago, the United States accounted for 37% of global chip manufacturing. Today it's 12%. Not long ago, at that time, the United States manufactured nearly all of the world's most sophisticated chips. Today, we manufacture none. In fact, we rely on one company in Taiwan for 92% of our most sophisticated chips. You let that settle in. That's a vulnerability that's unsustainable. And the truth of it is, those 92% of chips made in Taiwan are still based on technology created at UC Berkeley with federal funding. Talk about losing an edge. Talk about taking your eye off the ball and watching the atrophy. In 2001, after I had graduated law school, so now we're talking real recent history, the US had more than 300,000 semiconductor manufacturing workers. We've lost a third of those jobs, but at the same time, the global semiconductor industry has more than tripled. Guys, we're behind. We let ourselves go from the top to being behind. And as the cost of innovation increased, the semiconductor supply chain became more globalized. As I said, we were in search of specialization, lower cost labor. It all went to other parts of the world. So today, there are fewer manufacturers, but also fewer suppliers, and quite frankly, fewer opportunities for a new generation of innovators to develop cutting-edge research and development. And by the way, President Biden is constantly pointing out, to his great credit, these losses in manufacturing aren't limited to the semiconductor industry. In the past 25 years, the United States has lost 25% of its small and mid-sized manufacturers. And by the way, with them, we lost all their know-how, skills, and jobs. I'm not saying we have to make everything in America. Nobody is saying that. But the reality is the manufacturing atrophy in the semiconductor industry has real consequences. For starters, it's a threat to our national security. Almost all of our sophisticated defense capabilities, satellites, drones, hypersonic weapons, you can't do any of that without chips. Those weapons used by the United States military depend on a supply of chips that are currently not produced in America, and the vast majority are tested in China. And our dependence on foreign semiconductor supply chains also hurts our economy. And a couple years ago, in 2021, when inflation was peaking, car prices increased by nearly 30%. And at that time, the increase in car prices was responsible for about a third of core inflation. Do you know why? Lack of chips. Listen to this. This blows my mind. Last year, because Ford Motor Company couldn't get access to enough chips, even for simple things like windshield wipers, they couldn't put together the windshield wipers. Ford's workers in Michigan and Indiana only worked a full week 3 times in the entire year. They were furloughed. They were put out of work because they couldn't put it together because they didn't have the chips. I've talked to so many medical device company executives who don't have enough chips to make life-saving products like pacemakers, insulin pumps. Guys, these are the products used in every hospital in America every day to keep people alive. And we are utterly reliant on other countries for the supply of chips. Meanwhile, in the last 2 years, China's produced more than 80% of new global chip capacity for these kind of mature chips that we need in cars and medical devices. Think about that if you find yourself in the hospital. The process of designing and building chips, this is not easy, right? It's the most technical and sophisticated manufacturing process in human history, and getting more complicated as the chips get smaller and we need more compute power. But I'll tell you this, this isn't hyperbole. The brutal reality is that without manufacturing strength here in the United States of America, and the innovation that flows from manufacturing, we are at a distinct disadvantage in the race to invent and commercialize future generations of technology. All the technology that we will need to compete in the future depends on chips and manufacturing chips and the innovation that flows from it. The CHIPS Act allocated $39 billion for manufacturing incentives to encourage companies to build and expand here, to account for the fact that it's more expensive. We know it's more expensive to build a big factory in America than in Asia. And so on next Tuesday, we'll be announcing the application for that process. And everyone's going to want to know next Tuesday, a lot of members of the press here, how much money is Intel getting, how much money is Samsung getting. I don't want to talk about that. I want to go, let's zoom out and talk about what are the goals, the national security goals that we must achieve in the next decade through implementing this program. First, America needs to design and produce the world's most advanced chips right here in America. Good news, America still leads in design and software, but it isn't enough. We need to lead in manufacturing. Specifically, with the CHIPS program, we need to make sure that at the end, the United States has at least 2 new large-scale clusters of leading-edge logic fabs that will have been built here in America. Each cluster will include a robust supplier ecosystem, research and development facilities to continuously innovate new process technologies, and specialized infrastructure. And by the way, every one of those clusters will employ 10,000 plus workers, American workers, in high-paying jobs, from folks right out of high school to PhD scientists and engineers. Additionally, the United States will develop multiple high-volume advanced packaging facilities and become a global leader in packaging technologies. Fortunately for you, because the speech will be lengthy as it is, I'm not going to go into what packaging is and why it matters. I'll simply say, as chips get smaller, the way you arrange the chips, which is packaging, is more and more important, and we need it done in America. We also need U.S. fabs to produce advanced memory chips on economically competitive terms. It's time to innovate, to bring down costs so we can make it in America. And the United States will strategically increase its production capacity for current generation and mature node chips, sometimes called legacy chips, which are the chips I've been talking about for cars, military equipment, medical devices that are necessary for economic and national security. Now, you may listen to this and think that's lofty, and it's true. It's true. This won't be easy. I am eyes wide open to the challenges of implementing a publicly funded initiative of this scale and level of complexity. Now, but I'm ambitious, I'm not naive. And the truth of it is, we don't have a choice. The stakes are so high, the world isn't waiting. It's America's obligation to lead, and there has never been a better time to push ourselves to reach further than we ever have before. Our vision at the end of this initiative is to make it so that the United States of America is the only country in the world where every company capable of producing leading-edge chips will have a significant R&D and high-volume manufacturing presence in our country. I love that. The United States, how will you know in 10 years? Did this work? Were we successful? Did we achieve the president's vision? The United States of America will be the premier destination in the world where new leading-edge chip architectures can be invented in our research labs, designed for every end-use application, manufactured at scale, and packaged with the most advanced technologies. That combination of technological leadership, supplier diversity, and resiliency doesn't exist anywhere in the world today. And it won't exist anywhere in the world until and unless we're successful in implementing this initiative. And we will. And I want to be very clear. What we're not trying to do is aim for self-sufficiency. I don't want you to leave here thinking that, what I'm saying is we need to make in America all of the chips we use. That isn't our goal. That isn't a sensible goal. We are in no way looking to close ourselves off from global markets or competition or trade, as we started with our discussion. Absolutely not. But we are looking to win the innovation race, and we are looking to protect our national security and economic future. And we need to be in a much stronger position, quite frankly, to lead the world in a fiercely competitive and global industry. Someone said to me, is there anything else like chips in technology? The answer is not really. There's no other single component which is as vital and ubiquitous and forms the foundation of every other technology. So I've talked so far about manufacturing, and we must do that for all of the reasons I've said. But if all we do is focus on that, our success will be short-lived. And that's why the President and Congress were very wise. In addition to allocating $39 billion for company incentives, they also realized, and we know, that we have to have a robust research and development ecosystem in order to keep these companies here. And so that's why the Commerce Department will also be investing $11 billion to build a strong semiconductor research and development ecosystem to generate the ideas, inventions, and talent that we need to support these efforts, and quite frankly, to sustain the industry. It's one thing to get companies here, we need them to stay here, and that's innovation. The heart of the $11 billion will be establishing something called the National Semiconductor Technology Center, NSTC. I am, however, hopeful that some marketing person in my operation renames it, so if anyone here has a great idea, I'm all for it. But for now, we'll call it the NSTC. Let me tell you what it's going to be and what it won't be. The vision for it is an ambitious public-private partnership where government, industry, semiconductor customers, the ones deciding what the end-use applications are, entrepreneurs, investors, venture capitalists, where they all converge together to innovate, connect, and solve the industry's biggest problems. It won't be a single place. We envision a network of centers around the country working in combination, solving the most relevant, impactful, universal research and development challenges in the industry. Their work has to be fueled by industry, customers and the big companies. And they'll generate new devices, new processes, new tools, new materials for the manufacturing ecosystem. And their goal will be to make sure that the United States leads the way in the world in the next generation of semiconductor technologies, such that all the future applications quantum computing, material science, AR, all of these applications will need chips, applications we haven't even thought of today. They should come out of these beehives of innovation, with startups sprouting up around them. As I've said, America's semiconductor industry started and thrived because it was a space where startups could drive innovation and where they could compete. They have to have a chance. Today, the barriers to entry for startups in the semiconductor industry are nearly prohibitive. I mean, the reality is it's never been more expensive to bring a new chip to market in America, so it's hard for a startup. It could cost sometimes $500 million to take a new chip from an idea through, being ready to manufacture. So that stifles innovation. By the way, it's why venture capital over the years has shriveled up in the area of hardware. Like in 2005, more than 20% of US venture capital went into hardware startups. Today it's like 2%. You know where it is. It's in software, internet, algorithms. Everyone's a coder, which is great because we need all that. We really do. But we also need to make things. We need the ASIC systems and the chips and the stuff to power all of those next generation. And the reality is access to fabs, which are the big fabs that make this stuff at scale, is just very expensive, hard to find. And honestly, the talent is hard to find. When you don't make things anymore, you don't have the people who know how to make things. The NSTC has to reverse that trend by making it easier and cheaper for new and disruptive entrants to get into the market, to have lab space available for free or very low cost for new companies, for new startups. And by the way, if we do this right, back to the report card you're going to score me on in 10 years, our goal for the NSTC is that at the end of the decade, we want to cut in half the projected cost of moving a new chip from concept to commercialization. Again, not easy, it's doable. We're also eager to work with our partners and allies. Here at the School of Foreign Service, you appreciate this probably more than most. We have to work with our partners and allies all around the world to create diverse, resilient, sustainable supply chains. We have to work with our allies that share our values to write the tech standards around our values of protection of human rights and openness, and to invest in our shared digital future. We've already started this work in the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, which I'm co-leading, in the Quad, the US-EU Trade and Technology Council. It's happening. But we are committed, and I want everyone to hear this, we in the United States, under the President's leadership, are committed to being transparent with our allies in how we administer this program and developing strategies in collaboration with them. By the way, it's to our mutual benefit. We'll avoid a race, a subsidy race, which is no good for our allies or us. It's a waste of taxpayer money, and it'll make sure our combined supply chains are more resilient and diversified. And very importantly, we will continue to work with our allies to enforce our restrictions. Investments in chips allow us to gain an edge. Investing in innovation will gain an edge. The export controls and restrictions with our allies allow us to keep the edge. And as I've said, many of these technologies, very bad things can happen if they get into the hands of malign actors. Now here's the deal. None of this will happen with just government investment. As I said in the beginning, I talked about President Kennedy and other presidents. This has to, if we're going to achieve what I'm talking about, back to being ambitious but not naive, I am here to issue a call to all of America, public sector, private investors, to get in the boat, row with us, achieving this mission, and invest in the chips industry, invest in the supply chain, invest in the talent. Chips for America is designed to spur and crowd in capital investment, not replace it. I don't want to spend a dime that I don't have to. It's intended to bring forward much more private investment. If I do my job right, if we do our job right, the $50 billion of public investment will crowd in $500 billion or more of private investment, of additional funding for manufacturing, for research and development, for startups. My job here isn't to displace the private sector, it's to lay the foundation to allow American business what they do best: innovate, scale, and compete. And Chips for America, by the way, will create hundreds of thousands of good jobs in the process. High-paying jobs that offer family-sustaining benefits all over the country, not just in cities. But none of it's going to work if we don't have the people to do the work. I just gave an interview before the speech and was asked what are some of the key risks. And one that's at the top of my list is talent. We're in a very tight labor market. We're about to create hundreds of thousands of jobs. We will not succeed without the trained workforce to meet this mission. This is about people. We've got to be honest about that. By the way, we have to get creative. It is time to get creative around how we train and place people into these jobs if we're going to be globally competitive. It starts with training and inspiring a generation of engineers and scientists who are excited about manufacturing. Right? I mean, I don't know how many of you were in high school thinking, I want to go into the manufacturing business. I want to make things in America. Maybe not many, maybe some, I hope. Oh, he raised his hand. Good. We have one. But it's not, we got away from manufacturing. It's not what people think about. Maybe you don't think it's cool or sexy or innovative. When I talk to CEOs of some of the Taiwanese and Korean companies who we want to expand here, they say, but America doesn't do manufacturing. You don't have the talent base. Let me tell you this. In the 10 years after President Kennedy announced his mission to put a man on the moon, the number of physical science PhDs tripled, and the number of engineering PhDs quadrupled. We can do this. It's been done. So in the same way, over the next decade, I am challenging us and calling on colleges and universities to triple the number of graduates in semiconductor-related fields, including engineering. And we need more Americans to be part of this exciting innovation ecosystem. This is math, people. This isn't a political agenda. This is math. These colleges and universities have to expand their recruitment pipelines so that women, people of color, veterans, underserved communities can get these degrees and launch their careers. And by the way, these graduates need to be ready to work on day one, which means we got to change. We have to change. It means if you take engineering in college, you should be able to go get a job at one of these semiconductor facilities the day you graduate because you've been trained in the right skills, on the right software, on the right hardware, and you're ready to work. Colleges and universities need to partner with industry and align programs to the needs of the actual jobs available in these semiconductor fabs. Give college credit, even at the best universities, for actual work experience. Applied is not less than, it's necessary. Applied is not less than theoretical. It's necessary. If we're going to meet the mission, we need vastly more scientists and engineers trained in this country, excited about manufacturing and ready to work. That's how you compete in the world and lead the world. By the way, manufacturing is also one of the best places for workers without a college degree to find a really good, high-paying, family-supporting job. You know, as the president often says, more than 60% of the jobs in a typical semiconductor fab don't require a college degree. That's great news. And by the way, they pay 6 figures. So, but that's the good news. The bad news is we don't have enough people and we don't have enough high schools teaching in this way. So to meet the demand of the industry, I am calling on semiconductor companies and their supply chain to work with high schools and community colleges to train 100,000 new technicians in the next decade through creative apprenticeships, career and technical education, and career programs. This is doable. This is very doable. We can do the 100,000. We have to train differently. Teachers will have to teach differently. And we can put 100,000 people to work without college debt in amazing family-supporting jobs. But if we don't, let me tell you what happens. There'll be an estimated shortfall of 90,000 skilled technicians in the chip industry by 2030. It just doesn't work. The same is true for building these fabs. These are massively, so the average leading edge fab, by the way, is the size of 4 football fields. The scale is magnificent. I visited one in Korea with the president. Every facility requires 7, 8, 9, 10,000 people to build them, and it takes years. So in the process of building these new facilities in the coming years, we'll need well over 100,000 highly trained construction workers all across the country. In case you haven't noticed, the unemployment rate in the construction field is essentially 0. It's a very tight labor market. So we have to think differently. Once again, if we don't think differently, this is just a question of math. We will not have the workers to build the facilities on time, on budget, with the skills. So once again, we need to open the pipeline to women, to veterans, to people of color. These people have never been in higher demand. We have to find new ways to go to girls in high school and ask them to think of themselves as a welder, a pipe fitter, a plumber, train them, get them into an apprenticeship program, and get them a job. So I am calling on construction companies and labor unions to work together toward the national goal of training another 1 million in construction over the next decade. There's 1 million now, to meet the demand not just in chips, but in other industries and infrastructure projects as well. It's not a political agenda, it is a fact. And I should say there are many labor unions that have pioneered really innovative and effective programs for reaching underserved communities and women, and I'd say, and the private sector. So once again, it's time to work together, get in the boat, row in the same direction towards our shared vision. It will be hard, but I want you to think about the stakes, which are pretty scary. And the truth of it is, once we get it right, our labor force in the United States of America will be the gold standard in the world. We want to double the semiconductor workforce in the next decade, and we want it to be the most diverse, productive in the world. And their success will attract even more talented individuals to join the ecosystem. And the training programs will draw on the best techniques and tools to attract, develop, and graduate an increasingly robust, diverse set of workers. It's a flywheel that we need to create, that we had, that we let disintegrate. And of course, when you do that, semiconductor companies will want to be in the United States because they'll have to be, not because we're giving them a big incentive, because we'll have the best R&D, the best education system, the best facilities, and the most secure country. So we have a choice, like so many things. I've been in public life for 12 years. It's easy to say, it's hard to do. But it starts with making a choice. The easy choice would be a limited, narrow vision. Next week, we put out the funding opportunity, companies apply, we give away multi-billion dollars of incentives to companies, they build a few new manufacturing facilities, we start make leading-edge chips in America, and we call it a day. It's the wrong choice. It's easier, but it's the wrong choice. It's small-minded. It won't fundamentally secure our national security. It won't fundamentally revitalize our manufacturing sector. And it won't fundamentally enable America to lead the world in advanced technology at one of the most critical points in global competition. So I think we have to make the other choice, the choice I've laid out for you today, to commit ourselves to the bigger vision. So, what does that look like in 10, 15, 20 years from now, if we choose the bolder path? What it looks like is we show the world that efficient global supply chains don't require us to sacrifice resiliency and security. They can be both if you innovate enough. We can show the world that America can once again lead in manufacturing and all of the innovation that comes from the manufacturing. And as I said before, the level of leadership, supplier diversity, resiliency doesn't exist anywhere in the world, and it won't exist anywhere in the world unless we do it here. When we look back, some future Commerce Secretary, I would like to look back and say, we created a generation of innovators. A generation of innovators to write the next chapter in our history and in our technology advancements. Every chip maker in the world will view a new expansion as having to be in the United States instead of in Asia, because it'll be core to their business model, not because they're getting a big subsidy. There'll be more venture capital going into chip-related hardware startups. The NSTC, which will hopefully have a new name by then, will power innovation with scientists and engineers and state-of-the-art facilities. And by the end of the decade, we'll have demonstrated technological achievements that solve real pain points that improve our lives. Colleges and universities will triple their graduation of new engineers over the next decade, creating a constant stream of diverse and talented workers. Tens of thousands of American workers without a four-year college degree will have access to really good, sustainable, high-paying jobs and career paths. We'll add rocket fuel to our global competitiveness, ensuring that America secures its role as a technological superpower for decades to come. So for me, it's a pretty clear choice. It is a pretty clear choice. It's a harder road, but it's a vision worth pursuing. And I don't like the other vision and what goes with it. President Biden has done more than any other president to revitalize American manufacturing and innovation. This program, Chips for America, is core to those efforts. And I'm ready to get to work, I'm ready to do this, and I'm ready to do it in partnership with you. So thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you so much for your remarks, Secretary Raimondo. I think I will hopefully take moderator's prerogative here and ask the first question while we give folks in the audience an opportunity to line up behind the two mics that we have here. If folks are interested in asking a question. Oh my goodness, lots of excitement about questions. So wonderful. So you touched a little bit about this in your remarks, this idea of the role of national security and the CHIPS Act. A lot of folks tend to look at the CHIPS Act and they say this is economic policy, it's industrial policy. But as you alluded to, there is a very important national security component to this. So could you talk a little bit about how this fits in with national security tools like export controls you mentioned and other tools of that nature?
Yeah, thank you. This is fundamentally a national security initiative. And as I said, some people say to me, what's the return that you're getting on your investment? The return on our investment is the achievement of national security goals, as I've outlined and will outline in more detail next week. Now, we will be creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, but fundamentally it's about making sure that we make the chips that we need on our shores and fuel the innovation that we need to fuel in America so that we can have the moral authority and technological authority to lead in the world and maintain our national security. So that's how I think about it. And with respect to industrial strategy, I don't think one should look at this as the beginning of, a long and robust national strategy. The chips are unique, and this is necessary, and so we're making this investment. And export controls, as I said, chips is about gaining a competitive edge, gaining a technological edge. Export controls are about keeping it. And by the way, China don't be naive about this. We're ahead. They want the technology to improve their military capability. And export controls, narrowly defined, are designed to make sure they don't get these chips to improve their military capability. We're got a lot going on.
I was going to say, I have
Let's
plenty of
go.
other questions I'd like to ask.
Feeling a little nervous.
But why don't we go ahead and start on this side here. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself and going ahead and asking your question.
Sure. Thank you, Secretary, for being here today. My name is Andrew. I'm a graduate student in the McCourt School of Public Policy. In my public policy classes, they tell me that when you offer a public subsidy, you naturally create a strong constituency that over time will rent seek and lobby aggressively to keep and even expand that subsidy. So how do you see this playing out in 10 years, even if we haven't accomplished the goals that you laid out in your speech, when it becomes politically very unfeasible and perhaps when even more industries argue that they are part of the supply chain and deserve more federal taxpayer dollars? When will we turn off the spigot? How do you see this playing out?
Well, as I said, I'll be retired, and that'll be your problem. No,
Oh,
kidding.
boy.
I'm kidding. Look, you raise an excellent question. And in many ways, there are a lot of people, including me, who are reluctant to engage in this kind of subsidy for large, profitable companies. And so I think we have to do it with caution for the reasons you say. However, there's no alternative when you're reliant upon Taiwan for 92% of your chips, and the cost of creating a fab in America is, at this point, 30% more than it is, for example, to do it there. This is a national security investment that we must make. I don't think we have to keep ourselves disciplined to make sure it's not a runaway train, as you describe. No doubt, companies will lobby, and we will need to say no. The reason that I explained what I did is that the goal here should be such that we have the workforce, the customers, the designers, all the leading research and development, so that companies kind of have to be in the United States or want to be in the United States because it's good for their business, not because of the subsidy.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I think, too, your point about also focusing on startups and some of the smaller companies as well, I think is a really important piece of this. So hopefully we can start to fund some of those and kind of bridge that gap between some of the larger firms. Over on my right.
Madam Secretary, thank you for being here today. I'm just a third-year undergrad student at Georgetown. So recently, the Biden administration's notion of restoring the soul of America and the notion of that America's back to its old allies seem like fading away. As an immigrant from South Korea, I would really hope America will value and support America's allies in East Asia, such as South Korea, Taiwan, and even Japan. Nevertheless, many believe that CHIPS Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the notion that semiconductors would be mostly manufactured in the U.S. resonate much with the last administration's America's First doctrine. America's old allies are suffering. For instance, Japan is expecting to slip from third place in the world GDP ranking. South Korea is no different, and its economy size is already overtaken by Russia and Iran in terms of GDP ranking amid the war. Madam Secretary, as a prestigious member of the cabinet, would you please elaborate on how America would support America's struggling allies in East Asia? Thank you.
Yeah. So, as I said in the speech briefly, but I'm happy to elaborate, we want to do this in partnership with our allies. Yesterday I met with the head of the Chamber of Commerce in Japan. I've talked extensively with my counterpart in South Korea. And of course, Samsung is a world leader in this area. We have an opportunity, because we're just beginning to implement chips right now, we are already talking to Europe, to Japan, to South Korea to figure out how do we do this together. We don't want a subsidy race, and we certainly don't want to produce all the chips we need in America. This isn't about that. We will be dependent on those countries for a long time, and that's fine. That's trade. That's globalization. That is all okay. But what we cannot have is what we have now, which is an untenable reliance upon one or two companies for what we need for our national security. So I think it's not, I think this will be an opportunity. By the way, Japanese companies are welcome to apply for the subsidy. Korean companies are welcome to apply for the subsidy if they build and do business in America. So I see this as being an opportunity to get closer with our allies if we do it right.
Thank you. Back over to the left.
Hi, I'm Benny. I'm a first year in the School of Foreign Service. And earlier you talked about strategic competition with China. And so I wanted to ask you, if America does not innovate and develop more manufacturing in semiconductors and research development, what is the impact of US-China relations? And also, what will happen if China overtakes America in this growing conflict between research and development and also the future of technology?
Right, so that's the risk, of course, and that's why we have to win here. That's why I say the stakes are high. That's exactly what I meant. As I think about our competition with China, which is, and we are going to keep it as competition and not conflict, we have an offensive strategy and a defensive strategy. The defensive strategy is export controls, denying China access to our super high-end technology. But offense is much more important, which is investing in America. We can outcompete, we can out-innovate anyone in the world if we invest in our talent, if we're smart here, if we allow entrepreneurs and researchers to do what they do best, if we allow American companies to do what they do best, innovate, compete, and scale. But we do need to invest in America, in our infrastructure. And one of the other things I'm working on, in addition to chips, I'm also investing $50 billion to bring the internet to every American. So, we need to invest in our people and in our technology and in chips. And I have no doubt, I am utterly confident in America's ability to compete. And I think we compete when we invest in us and we emerge as the global technological leader.
Thank you, and I think to tie the previous question into that as well, I think your point about doing this and bringing allies along with us is another way that we are going to hopefully outcompete China.
Exactly. It's important.
Thank you, Secretary Raimondo, for your remark. My name is Brian. I'm an international economics student, a junior here at the School of Foreign Service, and I'm from Taiwan. My first question is, will you ensure that the U.S. government will not engage in FTT, forcing TSMC Arizona to transfer key technologies to Intel? Secondly, according to TSMC founder Morris Chang, chips made in the U.S. are 2 times the cost than chips made in Taiwan. And after that, you have to ship all the chips all the way to Taiwan for testing and packaging, and ship them to China for product assembly, and then ship all of the final products here back in the U.S. for your consumers and your citizens to buy at a more expensive price at a time when U.S. families are already suffering from sustained inflation. Additionally, there has already been a 30-year talent gap in chip industry in the United States, as students from top U.S. universities aim to work at software companies like Google, Facebook. And there are also no fabs adjacent to top universities in the U.S. for students to intern at. The massive labor needed to obtain the semiconductor raw materials are also subject to super convoluted U.S. labor laws and robust unions. The support system of ASML here in the U.S. is weak, and there is a lack of chip industry cluster. Lastly, the rapid evolvement of this industry constantly requires new investments and tremendous money to renovate the fabs and prevent them from being out-of-dated hardwares. These shortcomings in US chips manufacturing led IBM and GlobalFoundries, 2 companies that were subsidized by Pentagon in the past, to fail. Nonetheless, the US has still yet to address these problems. Hence, my question is, are you concerned that this chip made in US agenda becomes a consuming vortex for the Biden and Democrat administration, adding little value for your citizens and taxpayers, but much pain? Thank you.
No, I'm not. Listen, you make good points. I've sat with Morris Chang to talk to him. His biggest customer is Apple in the United States, wants chips made in the United States. There are business reasons for companies to be doing this in the United States. And listen, I don't disagree with much of what you've said. You know, Morris and a lot of his colleagues were educated in the United States. As I said, most of the chips they're making now in Taiwan are based upon inventions at UC Berkeley. Not that long ago, we also made them in America. And you're exactly right. We stopped doing it. TSMC is an amazing company with I think they have 10,000 PhD engineers in Taiwan. Oh, no, excuse me, 10,000 engineers. I think 7 of the 10 are PhDs, something on that order of magnitude. And they like making things. You know, that's the big thing. That's what Morris will tell you. They like making things. So, yeah, we've lost our edge. There is no doubt about it. As a result, it's harder to do here and more expensive to do here. But it doesn't mean we can't revitalize that. And I would argue we have to revitalize that. And in so doing, we'll bring the cost down. This is a temporary subsidy and investment in research and development to revitalize that whole ecosystem so that 10, 15, 20 years from now, due to innovations, it'll be cheaper to make the chips here. We'll have the talent supply to do it. And by the way, we'll have packaging here, so they don't have to ship back there and ship here. So I think what you just described is the situation in which we find ourselves, and it's why we got to fix it.
All the more reason to work on implementing the CHIPS Act. We've got time for one more question, so right here on the left.
Hi, my name is Taiji Sasaki, and I'm a second-year graduate student majoring in foreign service, not foreign trade, unfortunately. I already had some concerns raised by my East Asian colleagues, so I feel bad to add another concern. But so you mentioned the importance of cooperating on export control measures, and I completely agree with what you said. But at the same time, there are like different perceptions about the right level of control and restrictions when it comes to export control measures. Do you have any intention to apply extraterritorial rule if, for example, Japan and Netherlands do not implement the agreed measures on export control against China on semiconductors?
It's an interesting question. It depends. You know, that's a tough question to answer. Let me say this. The right way to do export controls is in concert with allies. So for example, a year ago, we led a coalition of 36 countries to align export controls against Russia. We could have done what you said. We could have. We had the tools to do the extraterritorial controls, and I thought about it. So just quickly for everybody here, what he's talking about is semiconductors, for example. Almost all the semiconductors made in Taiwan are made on with American machinery and software. So technically, we could have said to Taiwan, you can't sell any of that to Russia because if you do, you can't use our hardware and software. That isn't really the right way. We prefer not to do that. We prefer to go to our allies, as we did in Ukraine, and say, instead, you should control it. You should use your own controls. We don't want to reach in and do that. So that's the way we want to operate, always with our allies, build consensus, build a coalition. Like you were saying, America is stronger vis-a-vis China if we combine with our allies. And for us, like working with allies on export controls is an article of faith. Having said that, and I want to be clear about this, our export controls are narrowly tailored and designed to deny China certain technology that China wants for its military. And we're going to do whatever we need to do to make that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And on that note, I think we will wrap up for today. Secretary Raimondo, thank you so much
Thank you, guys.
for this, and thank you all.